joined by Unionbank Senior Vice President and FinTech Business Group Head, Erica Dizon.
Banking and the open banking promise. So before we start, I invite you to keep an open mind and think about all the possibilities. After all, old ways won't open new doors. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure actually if everyone here has heard the term open banking and even open finance. Many intertwine these two words a lot, but actually the meaning is quite different. Open banking may seem to be a very technical term, but it really just means the ability for financial institutions to share information or data with third parties relating to accounts and even payments. However, open banking actually is quite limited to the banking environment, whereas on the other hand, we have open finance, wherein it transcends open banking in a sense that it gathers financial data across the entire financial sector, not just limited to banks, but including digital wallets, insurance, remittances, investments, and yes, even fintechs. So all in all, right, it is data and capability sharing and is the next step in the open banking journey. So in a nutshell, open banking is the sharing of data between financial institutions relating to payments and accounts, whereas open finance is the sharing of data and even capabilities across the entire financial sector. It represents a larger concept in which data interchange has expanded already beyond banks. Next slide, please. Let me just quickly drink. Okay, so just how stark the difference is, let's first take a look at where the banking sector is usually at now. Data sharing within the industry is actually quite low and highly fragmented. So it's similar to a 1:1 model, wherein one financial institution cannot access financial data currently held by another. So for example, as a user, this means I need to keep repeating giving out my information to each one of these financial institutions if I want to be able to access their services. It sounds a little tedious, right? But actually on the right-hand side, if we look at that, in an open banking environment, I can enable a 1:many model where the capability to share the information lies with the user to share his or her data if I want to, and I'll do it with another financial institution. So this framework actually allows for the ease of information so customers can effortlessly utilize different services across the financial ecosystem. So many of you may be wondering actually that in the UK, they have actually had this concept up and for 9 years already, which has completely changed their financial landscape. Okay, so the main principle lies where the data of customers previously owned by banks should belong to the customer. So the user can decide and should decide who will gain access to their information and who to disallow. Theoretically, it's like how YouTubers ask you to subscribe. You can also be able to unsubscribe your data from a specific provider. So in the next slide, we'll be seeing how this ecosystem is. And actually, a lot of us are already part of this ecosystem without even realizing it. Airbnb, for example, is a part of the sharing economy where I can rent out my space for a fee. Grab allows different drivers to get on the platform to offer their services and earn a commission. So we used to only be bound within the confines of a certain provider instead of many. Booking a room entails going into a space or into a specific chain of hotels and resorts. Getting a taxi will require you to call an operator. Now, there are multiple choices for a user. In fact, getting a car is dependent on your geolocation because it is the most efficient way to get your car at a shorter time period. Meanwhile, open banking and finance is quite similar. Sorry about that. So customers only used to deal with one bank for their financial needs. It's either this or you open multiple accounts with various providers. It is a closed ecosystem where banks need to defend their position. On the flip side, Open banking and open finance movement allows you to, in effect, become a traveler, so to speak, and cross borders. It allows for an open economy or an open ecosystem where the access of data is dependent on the customer, where the ecosystem is open to cooperation, or rather, competition. It requires the collaboration between financial institutions and e-wallets, payment aggregators, insurance providers, and even remittance counters. So at the core of it, we're able to do this via open APIs or application program interfaces. So it's actually just an underlying technology which we use to allow to connect with each other. So in the next slide, we'll see this specific quote that we have, and I'll give you a few minutes to sort of like digest what it really means. So it all sounds quite tedious and additional work, right? But actually, open banking and open finance, we believe, will reshape the customer relationship between banks and our customers. So why do we need it? I guess it goes without saying that the dawn of the internet, the change in preferences among the Gen Zers and the millennials, and even the pandemic brought a totally different mindset of going digital. So as our customer change, banks should also catch up and do the same. From a bank's perspective, our customers started to transform and use different platforms and services. The actions that we used to do with brick and mortar stores and providers have evolved and moved into the digital space. So out of a population of 112 million, the Philippines is actually projected to have 75 million e-wallet users by 2023 and over 53 million online shoppers by the end of the year. So these are clear signs and visible manifestations of a growing digital economy. So in the next slide, let's see, right? And it begs the question, why open banking and finance? Is it the answer? It has different benefits and relevance for each sector. So let me walk you through all of them. So let's begin with financial providers. It's clear with changing customer preferences, we need to evolve our own products and offerings. Open banking and finance does this by allowing banks to stay ahead of digital disruptors by employing new products and offerings coming from the partnerships we have with fintechs, tech providers, and even digital service companies. Imagine if we didn't do this, how aggressive online lenders are. They will actually continue to appropriate a portion of market share coming from the bank's retail and SME loans. And from here, because of open banking and finance, we're able to see business models we did not previously think of. So as an example, a lot of borrowers would still want to get loans from banks because of its reputation and credibility. However, banks are known for having different and very stringent credit requirements, right? And so we have models that now allow us to cater and enable the online lenders instead, indirectly still powering a portion of the market where we were previously unable to serve. Let's move on to the business side, where owners will start seeing increased transparency for their transactions. I believe we are actually already seeing this happen with the rise of PesoNet and InstaPay, which are transfers that allow you to move your funds from one FI to another. Now, however, more importantly, is for the customers, bringing together data from banks and third parties. Consumers are able to see a better view of their finances, allowing you to optimize our personal finances more efficiently, opening your investment portfolio, pay down your mortgages, store savings for a rainy day, auto transfers, allowances for even your kids, right? Every month end or every beginning of the month. These are just examples of how it will change, how open banking will change for our customers. And finally, I guess it goes without saying, inclusion is finally more possible via capacity to better view transactions across the board with no previous credit history. We are starting to see different ways to measure one's financial capability or capacity instead of the traditional ones, such as scoring them based on their online shopping historical purchases or digital wallet transfers. A more comprehensive picture allows for the inclusion for those who were previously underserved. So clearly, the vision to create an inclusive financial system is in line with the technological breakthroughs presented by the open banking and open finance platform. This is also reflected by the BSP's open finance framework, hinging itself upon innovation, competition, and of course, inclusion. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see the main factors that actually drives open banking. So speaking of the regulator, these are the various pillars that are actually the reason why the drive towards an open banking and finance is real. On the regulator side, the BSP, along with the other central banks globally, have already integrated an open finance framework built on the principles of consent, interoperability, and collaborative partnerships, allowing us to confidently embrace the ecosystem and the open mindset. So moving on in terms of market expectation, heightened expectations coming from the digital and even modern social experiences are redefining how we use technology, and banking and finance is no longer an exception. So that what's the one thing that customers can't live without? Yes, aside from food, family, and even loved ones, it's actually your phone, right? So favorite digital transactions are actually starting to become and move into the digital space, into the mobile space. And that's a changing customer perspective that we're seeing. Another example may be, why are there drop-offs still in online purchases? That's also because of friction. And we need to remove this because customers now expect end-to-end products across the entire value chain. So meanwhile, competition is here and has been here for a long time. The emergence of non-traditional players is another sleeping giant that many of us are seeing, and that may threaten our revenue streams and the customer relationships that we have built. So for those who still remain sleeping, they may need to wake up to the reality that we must face that in order to remain competitive, we must respond with a new set of service offerings. And finally, aside from competition, aside from the changing or the evolving customer needs, aside from the push from BSP and the government, I think infrastructure should not be a constraint, but it's another thing that is pushing towards open banking, open finance, right? Sure, we can always improve connectivity, but APIs are here to stay, and they're here to stay even before open APIs have evolved, so that we can launch new digital products by leveraging on our internal and even third-party APIs and build value-added capabilities. So all four of these factors are coming into play and have triggered the open banking and open finance movement and the beginning of the unbundling of traditional banking models. So let's go to the next slide, please, and we'll see like a map, right, of where we want to place the Philippines in terms of the open banking scheme across the world. So actually, there are over an estimated 90% of people in Southeast Asia already planning to use digital service from now on. Open banking and finance is actually already within our grasp. But, however, the key to real widespread adoption is two things. Number one, persuading consumers in taking the next step towards it, as long as it's with their consent and it is actually in their best interest. And number two, players in the open market ecosystem need to be open to it, which includes reducing friction across each other and as much as we can while following the standards that have been set by the regulator. So open banking, open finance is a major topic among fintech circles, but it has yet to gain popularity among the general public and gain traction with its relatively low awareness. But I guess that's why we are here today, right? So realizing the full extent of the benefits from the movement may take years thanks to a perfect cocktail required from market players and even regulators, but the promise is powerful. So who wouldn't want to be given a chance to finally be a part of the financial ecosystem, to have more options coming from relevant products, automated services? Our financial lives are evolving, and this is part of the revolution. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to see where Union Bank has live use cases. What are the relevance of it, and what is the value? So where does Union Bank stand actually in all of this? So in the first slide, we're going to see a use case or an example of how it's changing our lives in terms of opening your accounts. Here we see that you can actually start opening Union Bank accounts via a Cebu Pacific platform. So essentially, it allows Union Bank and users to be able to open accounts in various environments, in various platforms, not only limited into the Union Bank account or Union Bank portal. So what we see here actually is a perfect example of interoperability, having the ability to open an account from any other platform as a jump-off point. So that's just an example of the accounts. Next, we move into the next slide, right, which we see how Union Bank is utilizing open banking and open finance, and how we're trying to change lives by ways of payments. So again, we see interoperability, money from one platform to another. So money used to be it used to just sit in accounts most of the time if you weren't spending it, of course. So now you can switch from one platform to another and make quick, easy, and direct payments with all of these major e-wallet partners and all of these major e-commerce names. So the purchase of goods and services via an e-commerce platform seamlessly can happen now directly from your bank account. So if we go into the next slide, again, we'll see a different use case now. We discussed opening of accounts. We used to see the transfer of payments from one e-wallet to an e-commerce directly from your bank account. Now we'll see how we're doing this via remittances as well. So in this specific slide, we're seeing the freer movement of funds. Here we see the response to customer needs, such as going mobile and completing the whole value chain. So the remittance project actually was wherein Union Bank partnered with Western Union so that our kababayans offshore could send money directly into their Union Bank account if they needed to send money to their loved ones. And to complete the value chain, coming from your Union Bank account, you can also cash out the funds directly into counters such as Palawan Pawn Shop, LBC, and Cebuana Luhulier. So it's just an example of getting the funds from offshore and sending it out via counters if needed, if there were no banks available in that area. And lastly, we see it as another example. Here we see live use cases for insurances. So we're starting to embed insurances in the Union Bank online app, where we are opening the doors within the financial services sector. You may now utilize your funds and even shop around for the financial products best suited for you. And before we end, we could see, right, what specific product is better suited for Erica or for James or for Rico, right? So it gives you the capability to start shopping around and see, okay, this is the best insurance product for me and my family. So moving on just from accounts, from the payments, from remittances, and even from insurances, these are just a live use cases or live examples actually of how open banking is and what it's doing for us without even realizing it. So we wanted to share this quick video that
now straight to our fireside chat. I'll be asking you questions so we could dig deeper into the issues of open banking. And of course, like what you said earlier, there's still a lot of there's still low awareness about open banking and open finance, because I'm sure a lot of customers will still hesitate. Even with just the word open, I'm taking a look at the dictionary right now. It means exposed, not covered, allowing access, not blocked. So I'm sure there'll be second thoughts people will hesitate because they also want to find out about their own personal data privacy, which is now a growing concern for many Filipinos, given the mechanics of open banking. How are you ensuring that the data of your customers, which is coming from various platforms and from many partners, are not mishandled or stolen?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the biggest questions, right, about open finance and open banking. How do you safeguard the information or the data that you send across? First and foremost, I think we have to realize here that the importance, or at the core of open data and open banking, is that there should be customer consent, right? That's at the heart of it. We're giving back the power of data or if information back to the consumer. So ethically speaking, this works because, for example, Rico, you can only give the data as long as you consent to it, as long as you say yes. Now, aside from that, actually, the BSP has started to set up standards for the industry, right, to make sure that we follow these set of rules, and to ensure that these set of rules tell us what we can do and what we should do with the data that we get. So as long as we follow these set of standards, because of course it's for the protection of our consumers, right? So as long as we follow this, then it's up to us as the institutions that handle it, whether we want to follow it or not. And secondly, it's also up to us to make sure that aside from the set standards, we do more, right? By continuously improving our data security and data processes.
So basically, share with us what is this? What's in this consent form? If I decide to get into it, what is there? What are the details?
Okay, so usually, like in the same way, I know we've seen a lot of like terms and conditions, and then the terms and conditions are very, very long at the end of the day, that you just decide to just click yes, right? Because it's quite tedious to read them. I know that happens quite a lot. But then when it comes to open banking and open finance, right, we make sure that that type of consent is shorter. So every time actually you go into the Unionbank online app and you try to link, for example, your account to a Lazada wallet or to a GCash wallet, it's only 2 to 3 sentences that, yes, I would like to proceed to link my Unionbank account with this specific GCash or specific Lazada wallet. So that's all it entails. And at the same time, it makes sure that at the end of the day, those information and that data only stays within that environment and nobody else, unless there is consent given.
And no issues in terms of a leakage of information, even mobile phone numbers, that we will not be receiving text messages from all kinds of bogus companies and bogus businesses?
So far, we haven't gotten any of those. Although I've heard in the industry, right, that does happen quite a lot. So we plan to always stay vigilant, right? That is also always foremost at our minds, because data, a lot of people say like data is the new currency. So also on our end, we want to protect it as much as we can, because it is very, very valuable nowadays.
Absolutely. I still don't know how a lot of these bogus companies get my number. I mean, how it has really gone out there in the World Wide Web or on the internet, and how it has. And I receive all of these text messages earning 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 pesos a day. Of course, we totally understand that Unionbank continually invests in ensuring the safety of your customer data. You employ, of course, the most sophisticated tools to thwart any threat to the data of your customers. But given the amount and nature of data, Erica, that will potentially trade hands due to open banking, how can you ensure that you do this ethically?
So at the core of it, right, it's always about the ethics of it is about allowing the consumer to have that choice first and foremost. So again, we go back to the consent, why you would share that specific data. So for example, on your case, Rico, I do understand, for example, that you have multiple apps, right?
Yes.
And then every time you want to start an app, you have to like redo the whole sign up process again. But then the whole principle of this is that eventually that information, for example, that you've given Union Bank has also been utilized for you, for example, to connect with your Lazada wallet or your GCash wallet. So you don't need to do it twice. And at the same time, right, it was you who decided that you wanted to do that, not us. It just we just gave you that option, that feature to make your life simpler, more seamless, so that you can have an interoperability between your bank account and all of these various platforms.
Erica, in other countries, there are reports that customers are quite fearful of sharing their data. In fact, the report published by Forbes cited a study that 48% of customers have negative opinions about open banking. How do you address this apprehension about open banking and open finance now that it is still in its infancy here in the country and you're trying to raise awareness about it?
Yeah, so we do understand that, right? We've heard so many examples or instances of large tech companies selling your data for specific marketing or specific ads. But like the important thing that we have to remember here is that at the end of the day, number one, obviously, education is key, right? We want to make sure that the user knows what they're getting themselves into and why they're getting themselves into. So aside from education, number two, we believe that it is also important for the user to understand why they're sending that data to a different institution. And that's why we're here today, right? To show them, okay, this is open banking. These are the benefits. This is what it entails. So if you understand it and if you understand the benefits of it, then you should be able to decide on your own as a customer the power to give that data or not.
Absolutely. And of course, the concept of open banking means that you have, of course, to share the data of your customers with other partner institutions. And given the competitive nature of the industry you are in, how do you balance the need to collaborate with other players in the sector with the importance of also edging them out and securing the viability of your business?
We always have this question a lot. We get asked this a lot and quite often. And for us as Union Bank, maybe not like other banks, in our minds, we want to be more progressive in terms of our mindset, right? We understand that some financial institutions, some fintechs, some third parties have specific products and services that we don't. And we believe, though, that for us to be able to better serve our customers, we should be able to integrate those specific products and services into our own. So rather than competing with these third parties, with these fintechs, our mindset actually is to have more of a competition with them, because there is a place for for both of us to exist, and there is a place for us for a win-win-win model for the bank, for our partners, and even for our customers.
Mm-hmm. So a win-win model for Union Bank and its partners. Is this also a win-win situation for the ordinary Filipino, open banking and open finance?
Definitely. So I believe even the BSP's overall outlook on open finance and open banking is that at the end of the day, the end goal for them is for financial inclusion. So like just to give or reiterate the examples that were given earlier, previously, right, banks don't always have a clear picture of a specific user if they don't have a banking relationship with us. But I think that's slowly starting to change. We're starting to look at different data models, different data sets that allows us to become more inclusive in terms of giving someone a bank account. And that's, I think, the beginning or the first step of financial inclusion. We don't need to have you open a bank account with us necessarily, but we could also do that via checking your online purchases. How often do you load up or top up your e-wallets? And so having those different types of data sets also allows us to get a clear picture that yes, for example, I could serve Juan or I could serve this other Juan, even if they're not part of the formal financial sector. So yes, open banking's one of its main goal really is financial inclusion as well.
Financial inclusion, indeed. And this will also make the lives of every Filipino, whether formally banked or those that are underbanked and the unbanked. So you can offer a more efficient and progressive services through open banking and open finance.
Yes, definitely. So that is the hope, that is the goal. But it entails all of us, right, working together, because open banking and open finance is only as good as the number of players that cooperate within that ecosystem, right? And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we have to consider. And that's why we're here trying to push for it as one of the leading proponents of open banking in the Philippine financial sector.
And of course, for a lot of Filipinos as well who really want to get to know open banking and open finance better, I think customer experience is also very important. Apart from just clicking into your app and signing up, is there someone else on the other side of the service that you can talk to explain what these services are all about and what other digital offerings are being offered to clients?
Yes, definitely. I'm actually very glad you brought up customer experience, Rico, because at the core of it, right, at the heart of it, open banking, open finance should exist for the customer. And so at the forefront of our minds always as well, aside from the main concept of open banking, is how can we serve the customer better? And we realize, and we've noticed over the years, that our customers have changed, their preferences have changed. Nowadays, I'm not sure, Rico, if you still want to go to a bank branch just to make a deposit.
I still
Right.
do.
Okay.
I still belong. I'm still a dinosaur, Erica. I still like to go to a bank branch together with my passbook and, and still make that deposit. I still don't totally put my trust on an application. So that mindset, I think I still belong to maybe to that large community of Filipinos who still like to go physically to the bank and make that deposit rather than transferring funds from one app to another or from one bank to another through an app.
We do
I have to be reformed.
Thank you for being honest. That's fine though, and we do realize that there is still a certain sector, right, of the community who still wants to do banking that way. But we also have to see the next step, right? Because if you only keep looking at one path, then the rest of the industry definitely will leave us behind, and that's not the positioning that we want to be at. So what we do here is that we want to be able to be there for both types of demographics, the Ricos of the worlds or the Ericas of the worlds who would rather be able to do things interoperably, seamlessly with my mobile phone instead of having to go to lining up or like calling my RM or my branch manager. So yes, we want to be there for both. What we're just discussing now is that what is the next step? Where do you forecast everything will move eventually? But without necessarily discounting that, yes, there are still Ricos out there who need to be converted.
Well, maybe not only me, but also maybe my other colleagues right here in the media will also attest to it. That maybe a lot of us also learned, transferring funds online through apps, especially during this pandemic. That's when I only learned how to transfer funds in April of 2020. Even when I was living in Singapore, I mean, that is such a highly digitalized country. I would still really go to DBS Bank and transfer my funds or transact. So we all learned a lot during this pandemic.
Yes, so definitely we all learned a lot during this pandemic. But it doesn't remove, right, people's different preferences. That will still continue to exist for sure. I see in the chat, what is passbook now?
Oh my gosh. That will be during our Q&A. We have already quite a number of questions from our media friends, so we'll be asking you those questions in a while. Of course, Erica, no, we would also like to find out, because just like me, who's a dinosaur, I mean, we always fear about data breaches or fraudulent dealing. So how is the Union Bank trying to curtail these issues? I mean, these issues of data breaches and fraudulent dealings have also been ongoing. Have been an ongoing issue in the banking sector.
So actually, we've done three things, right, to combat that, because it is a reality that really we must face as an entire financial sector, because it happens to everyone, I'm sure. So on our end, number one, definitely is to educate our users. Don't give out your information with just any link that you see. Don't click suspicious links or suspicious emails, right? I think that is the first step. Secondly, on our end, internally within the bank, we always have a review of our processes and of the things that we could continuously improve, right, to make sure that things like that are reduced. So for an example of that is that we made sure that, for example, Rico, you always log in a specific IP address. Then we make sure that if you are logging in from a different IP address, then it sends out an alert to us, right? So those are just a few examples of how we're continuously also evolving, because let's face it, these fraudsters, these hackers are also getting better at their jobs, right? Especially with the pandemic, they've become more creative, and they've actually made ads that look very realistic. And so we also have to evolve on our side, because as they get smarter, so should we. And those are just a few examples of how we're trying to combat that.
That's right. Even sometimes these hackers are one step or two steps ahead of us. So we really have to be very wary of what they do. We always have to be in step with them. Let me ask you a technical question, Erica. Given the current internet structure that we have in the country today, do you think that it is robust enough to support the expected wider adoption of open banking?
I'm so glad you brought it up, Rico. To be honest, connectivity is a big deal. It is part of the infrastructure, right, that is necessary or that is required, so that more and more people get into the open banking and open finance movement. But I believe it has still a lot of space to improve. So specifically on our end, if there are downtimes, for example, or there are connectivity issues, it really does affect our transactions. But that's just the reality of how things are here in the Philippines. So I think moving forward, that while it's slowly getting there, we could still do better in terms of connectivity and infrastructure. So I think the government is trying to do something about it, but definitely it will take time. And number two, it's still a big factor for sure. But it doesn't mean that just because there are downtimes, there are system outages, that we shouldn't be moving forward with the next step, right, of how we envision banking and finance should be.
Yeah, I'm sure, just like many of my colleagues here in the industry, when we are making fund transfers in the middle, sometimes you just lose your internet connection or your Wi-Fi connection. And there's still much to be desired in terms of our internet infrastructure here in the country, and hopefully the next administration will be able to resolve this in due time. What about APIs, application programming interface? How do they fuel the wider adoption of open banking? And can you tell us how Union Bank is utilizing its APIs to enable early and widespread adoption of open banking and open finance?
Okay, sure. So open banking, open finance is the concept, right? Whereas open application program interfaces or APIs is the underlying technology that we use to allow the movement of data. So for Union Bank in particular, we've always have an open API principle. So what this means is that even if you don't have a Union Bank account necessarily, we can show you the documentation of open API so that you could test it, so our partners can test it, so that fintechs can test it. Whereas in other banks, they require you to still have a bank account so that you could check these APIs. That's not the mindset that we have. It's completely open, right? And so we want to make sure that even if before you onboard with us, you test the products that we have. You test the connectivities that we have, so that you could check already if this really suits you without requiring you to go through the whole process of account opening. So that's just an example of the mindset that we take, and it also transforms or passes into the technology that we use and how we want to use that technology for better widespread adoption. Secondly, we've also instigated API marketplace. So my predecessors have designed it in such a way that it's like similar to Netflix. If you need a specific requirement or a specific payments example or use case, you can just click through the marketplace and automatically see the specs of that API. And if you need that, then you can easily check the documentation and test it with your own systems. So that's how we designed it, with, of course, open banking, open finance in mind, right? So we want to reduce the friction that's already there to begin with by making sure everyone can check out these capabilities that we've built.
And before we go to the questions, cross over to the questions of the media, Erica, Unionbank is a trailblazer when it comes to banking innovation. How can this strategy create new value for Unionbank as a whole? Will it really help the bank in its bottom line?
Of course, yes. So open banking, open finance, actually, it gives the bank a better view of what is out there. So what it does is that we're able to see new business models that we did not previously see before. And from these new business models, we're able to generate more income streams, more revenue models, right? So yes, it adds value to our bottom line, but more importantly, it adds value to our customers and how they do their finances and how they do their transactions. And I think at the core of it, that is obviously important to us. But of course, as a bank, there is a bottom line that we need to think of. But we believe that there is an intersection, a space for both to coexist, for the customers to be served appropriately, and for the bank to be able to have new business models, maybe that other banks don't necessarily see immediately because their mindset or their strategy is different.